Try that again. Good afternoon. And welcome to the 31st Williston Basin Petroleum Conference. We're excited you're all in the city of Bismarck, and it's going to be a fantastic 3 days, and I personally really appreciate that you got here today for this session, which is something new for us, but it's going to be a fantastic discussion among some of our region's top political leaders, certainly. My name is Ron Ness, and I'm the president of the North Dakota Petroleum Council. We look forward to hosting you, and trust me, if you need anything, contact me or one of my staff members out at the front desk, because we're here because you're here. We want this to be a great experience. We've got 310 exhibitors inside and outside, and please take your time to walk by the exhibits. We've got a fantastic lineup of exhibits. Tomorrow we're going to have Bakken CEOs at those booths throughout the day. The lineup of speakers we have is world-class. You're simply here with a tremendous opportunity to learn what's not only going on in the Bakken, but across this country, from politics to technology to business opportunities. So again, I think we just went over 2,300 people, so how about a round of applause for all of you for joining us. We've got a couple items the next few days that I just want to point out and make sure that you've got an opportunity. Later this afternoon, at 5 o'clock in the exhibit hall, we're gonna just take about 9 minutes, and we're gonna celebrate North Dakota reaching 5 billion barrels of Bakken oil production. I've been doing a bunch of interviews today, and you know, I believe the Bakken is the 19th formation in the world to ever produce 5 billion barrels. And we're the second formation in North America to ever produce 5 billion barrels. Certainly the Texas and some of those other formations will get there, but the Bakken is leading the charge, just like we've led the charge on technology, to figure out how to crack the code on shale. And this week we're here not only to celebrate that 5 billion barrels, but to talk about the next 5 billion and the next 5 billion, because there's 300 billion barrels of oil in the Williston Basin, in the Bakken, and we need to get all of it we can. So that's what brings people here, is the opportunities, the technology, the learnings, the politics, and the business opportunities. So visit the booths. That's what they're here for, to see you and talk to you about their business. So it's my pleasure today to get this show started by introducing our first session chair, who is Blue Hulsey. He's the Senior Vice President of Health, Safety, and Environment and Government Relations and Regulatory Affairs at Continental Resources. He's responsible for the strategic leadership of the corporate HS&E and ESG programs, along with guiding corporate policy and regulatory activities. Blue's a past chairman of the North Dakota Petroleum Council, currently serves on our executive committee as well. He's currently also the chairman of the Petroleum Alliance of Oklahoma. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our good friend, Blue Hulsey.
Thank you so much, Ron, and super excited to be here today to what I believe is the greatest oil and gas show and event in the country, and super excited to get the show kicked off. Also, if you haven't got your picture with the working pump jack, I think it's hashtag pump jack, or I don't know, we'll get that get trending on Twitter somewhere. It's very exciting today to introduce Kelly Armstrong, Congressman Kelly Armstrong, and Congressman Ryan Zinke. If you don't know both of these gentlemen, they really are champions for our industry. Congressman Armstrong, of course, is representing the state of North Dakota. He's the sole U.S. representative. He is a past state senator. He serves on the very, very important Energy and Commerce Committee, representing our industry on that committee. Does a great job. I think, in fact, one or two folks in Congress at all that has worked within our industry. So somebody that's super valuable, as well as Congressman Ryan Zinke, who serves as the representative from the western part of Montana. Of course, he has extensive knowledge, has served as the U.S. Secretary of Interior, has extensive knowledge about our industry, represents the state of Montana extremely well. Please join me as we have a conversation with Congressman Zinke and Congressman Kelly Armstrong. All right. Congressman Zinke, I was going to start with you since you're a guest, and Kelly lives here. And we'll let the guests go first. And what I thought I'd just kind of start by just asking kind of a broad question of this is a room of oil and gas folks who really do now. We are paying attention to what's going on in D.C. Why don't you kind of maybe give us an update of what we should be paying attention, latest actions, what we should be paying attention to that's going on in Congress right now?
Well, I think you all know you have an administration that hates you. For some reason, this administration has now an EV world. By the way, just a few basic facts if you're real about. One reason why I'm such an optimist is that America has enormous energy potential. We just have to use it. When I was secretary, when I came in, we were 8.3 million barrels a day as a country, production, and declining. In 2 years, we were 12.5 million barrels a day, the world's largest exporter of energy. We lowered emissions, and gas was about $2 a gallon. That's a span of 2 years. So one reason why I'm such an optimist is I understand that we can make America great, and we can be, once again, dominant in our energy field. D.C. at the moment with the Biden administration, and I'll be straight, they hate the idea of fossil fuels. And D.C. is being driven by really two factions. And if you think President Biden is running day to day, I would probably say a little different. But the two factions are, one, you have globalists that believe America should not be sovereign or at least be one of many flags rather than the leader of the West. And just a history lesson, unless America leads, there's no other country that can. And I mean that, no other country that can. And secondly, you have global warming climate activists. In the CEQ, when the Trump administration, the CEQ was probably about a dozen. Now they're over 100 strong, and they're driving a message, and they're driving America away from a couple core values. Number one is manufacturing. You can't manufacture unless energy costs are low. And nobody does it better than we do. Unsupported American energy, given that we exercise our potential, our costs are low, and we can manufacture. Because energy, whether you're going to go in the new world of looking at EV or the new world of data, it all requires an amazing, a massive amount of power, power that cannot be produced by any other means other than nuclear and fossil fuel. And so I think those are the two pivots we're seeing in Washington. Both those pivots have faults, and they are flawed. And lastly, I'd like to say this, is that, you know, for those that come here every year, look, I'm an optimist. We're going to get out of it, but it'll take three things real quickly. One is we got to hold the House, we got to advance in the Senate, and we got to elect the president. And those are three tough tasks, all of them. But if we do them and pay attention, this industry will once again thrive, because there's no alternatives in the next 50 years rather than fossil fuels. And no one does it better, more efficient, cleaner, smarter than we do.
Kelly, yeah.
A lot in there.
That's right. Kelly, your position on energy and commerce, super helpful for the industry, super helpful for the state, unbelievable. And I know where you're giving that up to run for governor. Tell us about what you guys are working on now, what we need to accomplish this past summer to kind of get some things moving on energy and commerce.
Well, first of all, I love the pump jack. Any of you have ever been in my office, I got a big pump jack painted on a door that hangs behind my desk, and very proud of what we do here and being in this industry my entire life. I think the number one thing that we have to do is continue to make a message that relates to people that don't live in Southwest North Dakota, that don't live in Western North Dakota. Because these agencies are running at a rate of trying to get regulatory or their rules in place, and you know why they're doing it. There's two reasons. One, because there's an election coming up and they want them all published before then. And two, because they know there's a Supreme Court case coming up that could cause significant problems for how the regulatory regime goes. And so we keep doing it, and we keep talking about it, and I think we just have to deal with it in the brunt of where we're at, because I actually don't think, I think in the short term, the way this works is they just want to outsource our guilt. That's what happens. They want to outsource our guilt. They're not anti-fossil fuel production. They just want it in Northern Africa and China and Russia and Iran and Qatar. They don't want it in the United States. So, I call out environmental justice every single time. There's no environmental justice for a 14-year-old slave going into a cobalt mine in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. There's no environmental justice for a Uyghur community that's building solar panels to bring over here so somebody can stand in their Manhattan penthouse with a cocktail and talk about the $7,500 rebate they get on their Tesla. There's none of those things exist, so we have to keep messaging and messaging and messaging, because I'll just take what Ryan said one step further. 35 districts are going to determine the majority in the U.S. House of Representatives. Somewhere between 38 and 45 counties are going to determine who the next president of the United States is. And the vast majority of those counties don't produce oil, don't produce natural gas. But they care about the cost of transportation, they care about the cost of groceries, they care about inflation, and everybody in this room understands that 75% of all inflationary pressures right now are energy related. And then I think the last thing which we really have to recognize is the decisions they're making now are really going to hurt production in 8 years, 12 years, 10 years. They're trying to get things in place, whether it's lease freezes in the Gulf or transportation issues and regulatory issues that exist up here, zero emissions, all of those different things. We have to deal with those issues so we can continue to produce more oil every day than we did the day before. And we just have to keep having that fight. And I think the messaging on energy dominance, the messaging on all of those things is great, but we also have to be able to take this message that people really care about in a different and, quite frankly, better way to the places that are going to determine who controls these bodies, because it's not a bipartisan issue anymore. It just isn't.
Yeah, you mentioned court cases, and we may want to touch on that, because I think that's so important with the regulatory onslaught that we're getting right now. I think a lot of these things are going to be in the judicial system. If you may want to talk about even the Chevron case and the US EPA versus West Virginia, and kind of what's the line that you see to push back?
Well, I think you can start in North Dakota. The difference between West Virginia versus EPA and waters of the U.S., I mean, let's just go to it. We've been talking about waters of the U.S. I know our ag commissioner's in here somewhere. Nobody gives a better presentation on it. West Virginia versus EPA, great case for North Dakota, great case for the energy industry, but it came 8 years later. Nobody changed the way they were doing business after that case came out. Moving forward, it's a good case. Why? The difference is WOTUS has never been law. We got an injunction. And in a span of 10 years, Congress passed 410 laws, which is about 300 too many. In the same period of time, they passed over 82,000 regulations. That's why Chevron deference matters. And that's why this administration is working so hard to publish rules before that case is heard. Because it's going to give governors like me the opportunity to sue the feds when the law is silent about a 3,600-page regulatory regime. And we're going to have to pick and choose those ones and go. And I think one of the things we're going to have to be as aggressive and more aggressive than we've ever been on is injunctive relief. Because if you get injunctive relief, then you have the ability to participate in the world as it is, as opposed to coming back and trying unwinding it later.
Yeah, I'll turn to Congressman Zinke, because I think that's a good segue into your experience as the Secretary of Interior and a secretary that worked with industry. You worked with tribes, you worked with all stakeholders, and really to the betterment of what we were all trying to do. But listen, this administration and the current secretary seems to not really want to listen a whole lot. If that administration does change, are we going to be able to really move some things around and put some permanency around development, put some permanency around infrastructure, those types of things, which it seems that this interior is doing nothing but stopping?
Well, another reason I'm an optimist, as Kelly points out, what we face is a regulatory burden, right? We get up in the morning, here comes a new regulation out of the regulation factory, and it's targeted at you. But it's not in law. And a fair criticism of this Congress, and it's been a mess and it's been sloppy, but this Congress has stopped a Democratic agenda. We've also stopped, in many cases, the Republican agenda. From a football analogy, blocking things, nothing's in law. We blocked law. Now, we'll say we also blocked each other, we blocked rules, we blocked a lot of things in this Congress. But the good thing is this, regulation can be snapped back. And I am 100% confident that a Trump administration, the regulatory snapback will be unprecedented, it will be violent, and it will be immediate. And we're going to go on the offense. What we learned last time, and Andrea would say, we thought that when 94% of Washington, D.C. voted for Biden, that's a lot. And then there's 6% I will argue probably don't work in government. So when you go to a Department of Interior or Department of Energy or Department of State, they're drawing from a DNA pool that's almost all monolithic in one party. And when you come in another party in the Trump administration and you want to change it, there was resistance. And most of us talk about the deep state. Well, I knew it was deep. I brought a set of hip waders because I'm a SEAL and I'm prepared. I should have brought a boat because it was a lot deeper than I thought. But again, this is a regulatory matter, and an administration has an enormous amount of power of undoing a regulation, even with an adversary court. So I do, again, my advice is hang in there, watch your spending, keep your capital tight, and do your duty to get a change in the administration, and this industry will thrive.
Kelly, can you guys talk about Speaker Johnson? I know you guys just some inside baseball on kind of the inner politics of the way Congress has worked and the vote you had just last week on him as Speaker.
Sure. I don't think anybody who's paying attention to anything wants to go through what we went through last October. I mean, I said it for 13 weeks in a row before we walked onto the floor of the House. We should have just stepped on a rake and then walked in. Speaker John, I've known him since I got to Congress. He was on Judiciary. We walked in under the Mueller investigation, Schiff's secret bunker, all of those things. Ryan said this earlier, and I agree with it. He's the most conservative speaker we've ever had. But there's a reason you don't throw somebody out in the middle of a term. I mean, he's thoughtful, he's conservative, he's all of those things, and he's getting underneath it. Unfortunately, and I just think this is independent of him or anybody else, is we have far too many of our colleagues that are interested in some modicum of mediocre social media fame, and dealing with the incentive structure is so broken that, you know, we have a one-vote majority. The Senate has a one-vote majority on their side. We don't control the White House. So we have a group of people that refuse to pass a rule which allows us to bring Republican policy and Republican amendments to the floor, which means you need 2/3 votes to pass anything, and then they get mad when you work with Democrats. So they legitimately have a political market that is based on an impossible task. And it's really, politically, it's convenient because they win when they lose. Like, I wish in politics I won when I lost. Like, it's a great place to be. If we win, we win. If we lose to the Senate, we blame Senator McConnell. If we lose to other Republicans in the House, we blame the Uniparty. If we get it through and it gets vetoed, we blame the White House. And we win when we lose, and we go raise $500,000 in an all caps double exclamation point email, and we walk around and deal with those things. But that's not moving the ball forward. I would just comment on one thing, because I think Ryan's really right. You know what they can undo? The stuff we got into law on NEPA. Now, we all know this, anybody who's dealt with it, but we brought back Trump-era shot clocks. We brought back all of those things, and there's some loopholes that need to be tightened. But if I've learned one thing in 12 years in writing legislation, it's a lot easier to tighten it up than it is to actually get it passed. So in the middle of those things, with an administration that is friendly to our industry, the laws we passed are going to be really, really helpful to that administration, independent of rolling back what's going on from this administration.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, I've been to a lot of battles in my life, and not every commanding general is George S. Patton. I'll let you in a little secret, because generals don't win wars. The front line wins wars. So in the House of Representatives, it's not the Speaker, it's the members. The Speaker is the Speaker of the body. He is the Speaker of the House as a whole. It's our membership. Montana, you know, we got to learn to circle the wagons and shoot out, and a little less shooting in. We can debate inside, but we shouldn't be shooting in. But when we face a Senate that is controlled by Chuck Schumer, an executive that's controlled by an administration led by Biden at some point, you know, our options are to the degree limited, but we're only as good as if we act together. And is there any bourbon drinkers out there? Yes. None? All right. Yes, there are. Well, I would say the best bourbon in the whole world in the House of Representatives, 218 Republican votes. It's pure, it's wonderful, it's not diluted. It's exactly what you think. But the moment you don't have 218 votes, and you got to go over to the Democrat side, you start diluting it. And if you're not careful, pretty soon you're going to be drinking tea rather than bourbon. So what I see as my assessment is we got crazy on the right, and we got commies on the left. And one thing about our crazies is when the national anthem plays, they stand. So they're patriotic crazies. But crazy's crazy, and us as Americans, this is what happens when we don't pay attention. When we think our government, even at the local level, when's the last time a school board or a library board has been controversial? It is now. You know why? Because we start paying attention. I say the same thing in our country. The moment we don't start paying attention to what we're doing and let the government run on its own, this is where the government's going to run to. So it's fixable, but it's only fixable as all of us, we got to do our duty. Kelly's duty is to run for governor and be a great governor. My duty, I was sitting on appropriations in the House of Representatives. I hate Washington, D.C. But everyone to their duty station. So again, I'm an optimist, but we all got to do our duty.
Well, you're talking crazy and bourbon, and you're getting a little personal over here, so I'm going to change the subject.
But at least the crazy on our side, the national anthem plays, they stand. They're patriotic.
So I have just really quick. So after one of these votes, there was a whole group of people fighting with Mike Johnson on the floor of the House after votes were over. And it was, I mean, it's obviously walking up to the motion to vacate. And so there's a different cadre. And I mean, it's a very heated discussion. And all of a sudden, Al Green is doing one of his magic minutes. And he starts saying the Pledge of Allegiance. So this group of 18 Republicans who are like frothing out the mouth mad at each other all immediately stop, turn around and do the pledge. And then he gets done and they turn around and immediately go right back into their fight. It was just phenomenally, it's just a perfect microcosm of what he just said.
Well, you know, we talk about the dysfunction of the House. Imagine for a moment if we did not have the majority in the House of Representatives. This country, in my opinion, would be over. They'd have full run. And if you don't think so, you listen to the State of the Union address by President Biden, because that's the agenda. Taxes like we've never seen it before in our life, and this industry is gone. And then in 17 minutes, the speech was 67. In 17 minutes, I lost count at 10 trillion with a T of new spending. So, though, you know, the House is frustrating because we didn't reach our potential. But I can tell you what we did do is we did block. And as blocking goes, we exceeded my wildest expectations on how this body could block. We blocked everything.
I want to touch on one issue. Your background in national security and understanding where you've been and understanding what our allies need from an energy perspective. But yet you have an administration that's initiated a block on permitting for LNG. We've got gas-oil ratios that are going up here in the Bakken and across the country. We've got unbelievable gas resources that we could certainly tie to allies, and allies want that gas resource. Can you talk about the tie between what that national security is and what this administration has done and the damage that's caused through that LNG permitting pause?
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. So when America decided we would be energy independent and then be an energy power, what does that mean globally? That means Lithuania, areas in Europe could extend, you know, American-made energy rather than made in Russia. That means that price competitiveness globally, we pushed the pressure down. It was about $2 a gallon, you know, somewhere in the 55-gallon or $55 a barrel mark. where you're making money, you have enough to invest, but also our economy is doing well because globally we can be competitive. When our allies turn to us for energy, it is a much, much better picture than turning to where they're getting it now. So where is our energy coming from? Let's see. We'll start with a lineup. Venezuela, one of my favorites. They produce a lot of times some of their product by backhoes, not particularly environmentally friendly, I don't think. Venezuela, communist. So then you have Russia, an antagonist, an adversary. Where are you going to get? And then Iran, the triad. So that's the alternative. Either you get it from the United States, where we produce it better, more efficiently, cost-effective, cleaner by far than any country in the world, or you can get it from an adversary that's doing harm on a global picture. To me, the choice is clear. American first energy policy works. America produces energy cleanest, best. So environmentally, it's better to produce energy here. Economically, it's better to produce energy here. Morally, it's better to produce energy in the United States. And this administration is 180 out.
Well, you think it's a coincidence the day after the Biden administration announced the LNG pause that the Qataris announced an 85% increase in output of natural gas? You think maybe some of our allies are making long-term investment infrastructure decisions that are going to take 5, 6, 7, 8 years to build? And then I'd think about it a different way. And we talk about inflation, we do it well. We talk about this administration's energy policy. Vladimir Putin invaded the Ukraine, and there's a hot war in the Middle East. I'm getting $66 a barrel for Bakken crude right now. Any other time in history, oil's over $120 a barrel. We're the victims of our own largesse. We're the victims of what you all have done in this room to allow us to not have those things. Because when oil goes above $120 a barrel, we've got problems with our allies that are in democracies that are spending 35% of their disposable income. Their citizens they're doing all of those things at the same time. So we have to, this is why it's so important. We're producing. Anybody who's ever looked at a decline curve on a Bakken well or a Three Forks well understands that today is not the problem. But somebody's making a decision as to whether or not they're going to buy LNG from the United States or get natural gas from Qatar. Those decisions are being made in other governments right now, and we have sent the signal that it's not going to be us.
Yeah, Kelly, you led the COP28 delegation. I can't think of anyone in the country better to lead it, and I hope you lead all the delegations to every COP in the future. Tell us how that went, and tell us the message that you got out of that event.
Two messages, well, three. One is uniquely bipartisan in the United States that is very much not everywhere else. Nuclear. There are people that want to export. South Korea is a perfect example. Taiwan. I mean, all of those different places, they don't want to do nuclear because it's such a different issue in other places, whereas we've actually had some bipartisan support on nuclear regulatory reform in the ENC committee. Two things I noticed. The countries with the largest economies and the safest and most sustainable economies are insane about energy policy. Not all of them, but the people they send to COP. I had a member from a European, basically crying, telling us that North Dakota needs to shut down all their oil and gas or the entire world's going to die. And they think that that everybody should do that, whether they're heating their house with wood or buffalo dung or any of those different issues. And then the other thing that I really noticed, which is something he said, which I hadn't thought about, their location, their borders to adversarial governments, 100% determine their energy policy. 100%. These Eastern Soviet bloc countries want us. They need us. They want us to be engaged in this fight because their coal plant's 6 miles away from the Russian border. And when we step away from that role, they notice. And they notice immediately, and they're terrified of it. We are the only country that can do this. We're the only country we can lead on this. And when you're the only grown-up in the room, you have a responsibility to be the grown-up. And I think we are moving and shrinking away from that. And I think it's a terrifying position for the world. We're really good at soft power and influence, and we should be utilizing it instead of shrinking from it.
Well, and if we're not, the Chinese are stepping in, right? I mean, that's the thing that's happening. If you've got American energy dominance that isn't in place, in some way you're going to have the inflection of the Chinese taking our place to yield influence.
Venezuela is going to develop their oil. It's going to be Chevron, it's going to be Iran, or it's going to be China. Which one do you want doing it? I mean, eventually that's where we're at. And we walk away from those things so we can, talk about, I don't know, putting up a charging station between Dickinson and Bismarck that nobody's ever going to use.
I'd pick Dickinson.
We just have a few more minutes left. And I did want to talk politics just because I've got you guys here, and I think that we want to hear kind of Congressman Zinke about Montana and really what you think of the future of the House and the Senate, and what's your pick of somebody who served in a Donald Trump cabinet, what you see nationally in the polls.
Well, I think the Democrats went way too far on picking on President Trump. I think this court case is a scam, is atrocious. It's as bad as I've ever seen. It's probably as bad as you've ever seen. For a court that has the power to throw in jail for abusing the rights of an individual, let alone a former president. Quite frankly, I don't care if you're a plumber or a president. The Constitution and rights apply to everybody. But when a president of the United States can get raked over the coals for this, buyer beware, because we all can be raked over the coals for it. So this has lasting, I think, influence. On Montana politics, Montana's an interesting state. Yellowstone, and by the way, I'm not wearing Kevin Costner's hat. This is my hat. But a lot of people view Montana now through Yellowstone. And it's interesting because Yellowstone is magnificently produced. It's well acted. I know Kevin Costner personally. He's a good guy. But it's a drama set in Montana. And just like Star Wars is a drama set in space, it really doesn't apply to how people live out there. Montana historically has been a mining state and an ag state. Montana still is an ag state, still #1, but Montana is changing. Some of it is COVID. People moving in Montana, well, we don't register Republican or Democrat. But people moving in from California or Oregon, they get license plates, and we can go back and figure out whether they were a Republican or Democrat. Well, we're finding in Montana that over 2-to-1, conservatives are moving into Montana. So, and there's a difference between a California Republican, I suppose, and a Montana Republican. But Montana is becoming redder. When I was in high school, we had a long series of Democratic governors. Today, the Montana political looks like this, is that we have a supermajority in the House, Republican, supermajority in the state Senate, Republican, and we have a governor who's Republican. All state elected officials are Republican but one, and that's Big John. So we have a Democratic senator that has been running, his voting record is pretty much on par with Elizabeth Warren. But he's been running for about a year on this last campaign, and he's pitted against a Navy SEAL, a kid that I pinned a Bronze Star on, Tim Sheehy. That's for real. He married a Marine. You'll love this story real quickly. The reason why he's attached to Montana, because he was in Afghanistan serving, his wife was a Marine serving, and Montana is one of these only states that you can get married in absentia. So we got married, and Montanans, while they were overseas, and then he later came back. Politically, it boils down to one district, because when I was a state representative at large, Montana had 1, and then recently we got 2, is that I won Montana by 16. That's a pretty big win. But I won my district, the new district, by about 3. Steve Daines won the state by 10 and won my district by 1. Now, John Tester won the district by 13. So it's a tough district, and I'm a SEAL and I like a tough fight. But both the House, because the objective of keeping the House and advancing the Senate, to a degree, come down to one little district. It comes down to Montana, because District 1, Tim Sheehy needs to be at par on that, and I need to win. So Montana's a tough race in this district. And what they're doing politically nationwide is there's 16 states. I think Montana's going to be one of them that's going to run some abortion constitutional amendment to try to bring the vote up. And then in colleges, they'll try to pack the campuses. That's their gameplay. Our gameplay is a little different. Our gameplay is bank the vote, go out and making sure that we do our part of banking the vote. Montanans in the years past have relied on day of the vote, come out to precinct and vote. We concentrate on that, but we need to be smarter, because the law says you can go out and vote early. So we're banking the vote, and we have a group of really, really good candidates. We'll go out and recruit people that love the country, that are willing to do the task. And believe me, being a congressman, it ain't easy. It was easier being a Navy SEAL than it is a congressman. And I know SEAL training's tough, but at least with a SEAL, if someone really upsets you, you can take them out. Now I just sit there and just, oh my God,
We should make a rule change.
That's a rule on the
Man,
floor.
I'm on a rule change.
But, Montana is the bellwether state. And the reason why it's important is both Dakota and Montana, and I'd say Wyoming, South Dakota, probably Idaho is in there. We're flyover states. Is that rarely do we get the opportunity to influence something on a national level. Usually it's regional. But this election, I've always said, this is the most important election of my life. I think I've said that every election, but now it's for real, all right? This is the most important election in my lifetime, and perhaps the country's. But also states like North Dakota and Montana have an outstretched influence, because it's going to be our vote that makes the difference, and that's important.
But we're almost out of time, but I do want to give Kelly the last word on, Kelly, you've had all this experience in D.C., you've had your experience here in the state government, you're running for governor. How does that role of governor, how do you push back on this regulatory overreach? What are some things with your leadership this state can do to make sure we're continuing to produce energy here in North Dakota?
Whenever we talk about President Trump, everything goes to volume 2000. I mean, he's a unique person in the history of U.S. politics. And we say broke the mold, we say one off. There will never, ever be anybody like him. But I think one thing we forget about, and Ryan could tell you if it was by accident or design or how of it, is how they utilized governors to take these things on. Texas just won a case at the Supreme Court. The NRA is going to win a case. Missouri's doing it. Louisiana's doing it. Florida's doing it. And I say this to everybody, and I mean it. It's been the greatest privilege of my life to be in D.C. for the last 5.5 years, and I think I've been in every fight that matters. The problem is we don't win a lot of them out there. Where are we winning? At the states. And by having the relationships I have with guys like Ryan in D.C., legislature here, understanding the regulatory regime that exists, and knowing which pressure points to push, and figuring out how to do that, that's how you do it. That's even before Chevron. After Chevron, Katie bar the door, man. We're going after it. I mean, and we've seen it. We've got a mercury rule. We've got a tailpipe emission rule. We've got intermittent acreage where they don't like our flaring, but they won't give us the permit. Like, we know all of these different issues, so how do you do it? You go out, you attack it, you attack it. And then the other answer, which is going to be good, is after 5 years of combat hearings in D.C., when they want to talk about issues that are important to us in a committee hearing room, I have a feeling sooner or later I'm going to get called and be asked to come out there and help participate in some of this stuff, because I'm not afraid to tangle with the people on the other side of the aisle when it's doing something that doesn't just destroy the industry that I care so much about, but destroys Dickinson and Tioga and Stanley and Watford and Arnegard and Williston and every single one of those communities in Minot and every one of those communities in between. Like, when you grew up in Western North Dakota and you graduated from high school in 1995 and you have the challenges North Dakota faces here in 2024, These challenges are a lot better than those challenges, and we don't ever want to go back to that. And that's because everybody in this room decided to invest their money, take a risk, and crack that code in the Bakken and the Three Forks. And now every single kid, there's people who've heard me say this, but it matters. Every kid who graduates from high school in Western North Dakota can build a life, can build a family, can build a career there. And we should never apologize for that, and we should fight to the end to make sure that we get to keep doing it. That's why this industry is so important to people in North Dakota. We can talk about energy dominance, energy security, all of those different things, and we should because we're a huge part of it. But to us, it's about baseball games and seeing your kids more than at Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving and being able to grow the greatest state. The second greatest state is right next door to the West, but the greatest state is still right here. So thank you for everything you do.
How about that?
And we agreed to limit the Montana, North Dakota jokes.
I'll tell you what, if that doesn't get you guys fired up, it gets me super fired up. Give these guys a hand. They are representing our industry, doing a great job in D.C. Thank you so much for being here. Great start to the Williston Basin Petroleum Conference. Thank you, Kelly, for taking time. I know these guys are so busy. So I think we have a quick break, and thank you guys for taking your time to be here.